Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 1 of the SEC Yesterday and Today. And I'm your host, Bird LaCroix. I'll be joined in just a few minutes with my first guest to inaugurate our podcast, and he is Lynn Scarbrough of Lindy's Football Magazine. But first of all, oddly enough, I'm going to mention something that I found in Athlon Magazine. That magazine launched 50 years ago, and to commemorate that, they got a panel of 16 prominent media members to come up with the best college football players of the last 50 years. And what I'd like to do now is share with you the Southeastern Conference players that made that list of top 50. Coming in at number 48, Danny Werfel of the University of Florida Gators. Number 45, Peyton Manning of the Tennessee Volunteers. And also from Tennessee, at number 43, Reggie White. Archie Manning of the Ole Miss Rebels came in at number 36. Cam Newton of Auburn, number 30. Derek Thomas of Alabama, number 21. And at number 17, also from Alabama, John Hanna. The number 6 player of the past 50 years, according to this panel, was Tim Tebow of the University of Florida. Number 5, Bo Jackson of the Auburn Tigers. And the number 1 football player of the last 50 years from the University of Georgia, Herschel Walker. Also, 50 years ago in the SEC, I'd like to mention that Nate Northington of the University of Kentucky became the first African-American to play in a varsity SEC football game. 50 years ago in the SEC, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets left the conference to become an independent in sports. The SEC football champion was the University of Tennessee Volunteers, and relating to that, the University of Southern California Trojans were the national football champion in 1967. Okay, that's taking a look back at our yesterday portion of the program, but today, again, we have with us as our guest Lynn Scarbrough of Lindy's Magazine, and Lindy has employed Lynn for the past 27 years, 22 of those years being a full-time staff member. He is the marketing director of the magazine. He's a website columnist, contributing writer, and one of the assistant editors at the publication. He's also the on-air co-host of the Lindy's Football Report Radio Hour, which is broadcast during this college football season on 63 stations around the Southeastern Conference. So we're going to welcome to today's show, Lynn Scarbrough.
Good day, everyone, sports fans, SEC fans, and welcome to the maiden voyage of the SEC Yesterday and Today. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have with us as our first guest, Lynn Scarbrough from Lindy's Magazine. And Lynn, I want to ask you how you are and how things are at Lindy's.
Well, great. We, as you know, we're always a season ahead in our publishing, so we actually have already sent our college and pro basketball magazines to the printer. So I'm ready to get into some football. People ask us all the time going into the season, man, you ready? Y'all must be working hard on football. You know, our football editions, which are the largest selling football editions in the country, the first one, the Southeastern one, probably one that the most of our audience gets and interested in, it actually goes to press the end of April. So it's time for some football, and got a little bit of a taste of it last weekend, kind of like an appetizer. But
yes.
The real stuff starts this weekend.
Yes, it's going to start cooking this weekend for sure. And with that, it's opening day weekend, and that's very exciting every year in and out for all of us. And I wanted to ask you if you have any quick comments on any opening days, anything that stands out to you, anything about the day or any particular game.
Yeah, well, I think in general 2 or 3 things. I like these early season intersectional matchups that have been more prevalent in recent years. You remember back in the days of the Kickoff Classic and those type things, that there were big significant games, weren't as many of them. But then they got away from that. But now they've gotten back to it. I think it's really a good thing. I think it's a good thing that the Southeastern Conference has more or less mandated that everybody in the conference play a team from another Power 5 conference. I think that's a good thing. And I think you've got this year, you've got some games that are really going to tell the tale. And I know we're going to talk about a couple of these on the show here early for Southeastern Conference teams. You got, of course, Alabama playing Florida State and Florida playing Michigan. There's a whole bunch of ranked, powerful teams. The next week you've got Auburn going up to Clemson and Georgia going up to Notre Dame, and you're going to know real fast about how some of these teams are, and some other significant games as well. And then another thing, Bird, last year the Atlantic Coast Conference made a big deal about that they've caught up with and passed the SEC, and certainly you can make a case last year with them having Florida State and Clemson make it so far, and Clemson winning the championship, maybe for a one-year thing. However, I don't think that traditionally you can make that case. Certainly not yet, and I don't think you'll be able to make it. But early this year, you're going to have a real good feel on this. You got Alabama playing Florida State, right off the bat, and then you got South Carolina going up to they're actually in North Carolina. It's a neutral field game, but South Carolina and NC State. NC State is a sleeper team. They got a good team. They got a tough schedule. They're not going to win that conference, but they could be some danger there. You got Tennessee playing at Georgia Tech. Tennessee lost a wide receiver to a shoulder injury, broken collarbone, gone the whole year. Georgia Tech released their top running back. That'll be an interesting matchup. And then the next week, Auburn goes to Clemson. So you're going to have four good programs in the SEC playing four good programs from the Atlantic Coast Conference. So I think after the first 2 weeks of the season, you're going to have a feel of which one of those guys is going to try to, claim bragging rights between the SEC and the ACC.
Yeah, and now we were speaking about the East and the Florida Gators, and we'll get into some predictions here in just a few minutes. But I wanted to ask you, the East is almost, in my opinion, been won by default the last few years. And so how do you see it? Who do you see possibly winning the East, and how do you see it stacking up, and why?
Well, the East has won it by default for 4 consecutive years. Mm-hmm. Missouri backed into it 2 years, and then Florida's backed into it 2 years. They have gotten in there because they play in the SEC East. That gives them more opportunity to have wins because the SEC West has been and is a better division right now. And when you look at how they paired, Alabama beat Florida badly last year. They beat them comfortably the year before that. The 2 years Missouri were in there, Auburn put like 59 or 60 on Missouri, and Alabama beat them comfortably. So the teams that have gotten in there have not fared well against Alabama and Auburn. The teams that have won the West, and you just look at games they've played. Otherwise, Florida State playing Florida has been beating them, and they've still been getting into the championship, SEC championship game. I just don't see that division being competitive against the West this year overall. I do think Georgia is a clear favorite to win the Eastern Division. If you remember last year, Bird, we had Tennessee ranked number 7 in the country, and absolutely drank the Kool-Aid for Tennessee. And here's the thing: this year, Bird, it's almost mirror image. Georgia versus Tennessee last year. Last year, you had Tennessee with a returning quarterback who had done well, Josh Dobbs. Georgia this year's got Jacob Eason. You had the 2 running backs at Tennessee, Jalen Hurd and Alvin Kamara. This year you got Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. You had a good defense coming back. You had a good recruiting class. Georgia, even a better recruiting class this year than Tennessee had. And the schedule went their way. And it goes that way this year for Georgia. They don't play Alabama. They don't play LSU. They play at Notre Dame, and we'll talk about that game, later on. But I think everything goes well for Georgia. They do play Florida, which they haven't historically, or at least in recent years, done real well. But I think Georgia is clearly the best team on paper because of their depth. Their defense is probably the best in the SEC, with all due respect to Alabama. Georgia's defense overall is probably as good or better than Alabama's. So I think Georgia's clearly the team to beat in the Eastern Division.
Yeah, well, I hear you. I actually predicted Florida winning again. I said, well, until in my opening column on the season last week, I had Florida winning it. And I said, well, I'm going to stick with the Gators till somebody knocks them out or gives me a reason like Georgia or Tennessee. And I've got Kentucky as a dark horse. How do you see Kentucky?
I think they could be. I think probably the dark horse in that division to me is the winner of the Kentucky-South Carolina game.
Okay.
And so whoever wins that ball game, I think, becomes the dark horse sleeper in the conference. And all of the teams, maybe with the possible exception of Vanderbilt, has got the possibility of knocking off some of the better teams. I'm so strong on Georgia winning the East that I just don't see anybody else winning it. But every other team except Vanderbilt, I think, would be able to have a role in it. Florida has to play at Missouri. We'll talk about Missouri in a bit maybe, but Florida has to play at Missouri. Auburn has to play at Missouri.
Yes.
And Missouri, we probably won't touch on their first game. He did play Missouri State, and that's going to be just a runaway for Missouri, unless I'm fooled. But Missouri, defensively last year, there's 130 teams in what used to be Division I football, and Missouri was 118th in defense. I mean, there were very few teams worse. Missouri scored 48 points at home in a game and lost. They scored 36 or 38 on the road and got beat by 25.
Barry Odom's a defensive guy too, so that was.
Yeah, exactly. But offensively, Drew Lock threw for over 3,000. Crockett ran for over 1,000. Jamon Moore had more than 1,000 receiving yards, and all those guys are back. This is a rhetorical question, Bird, because I don't know the answer. But how many teams are there in the country that return a 3,000-yard passer, a 1,000-yard rusher, and a 1,000-yard receiver? There aren't going to be many.
That many, and Dick to do so miserably still. Yeah. Yeah,
and when your offense is that good and you still don't have a winning season and you're giving up that. But with an offense that good, Missouri could upset somebody if they're looking ahead at other teams. I don't think Missouri's going to have much of a contest in this first week. Mississippi State's not going to get beat by Charleston Southern. Georgia's not going to get beat by Appalachian State. And that may be the only SEC 3 teams still to play that I think have a slam dunk win. I think there are several others that are clear favorites, but as far as just a slam dunk, I think maybe those 3 are the only ones.
Yeah. Now, let's go over to the West and give me a quick pick over there and a why on all of that.
Well, I'm going to take Alabama for the same reason you said about Florida, is that until somebody proves to me they're going to knock Alabama off, then I'm going to take Alabama. They have the best overall depth across the board at every position. When you've had the number 1 recruiting class in the country like 5 out of the last 6 years, something's wrong. If you don't have, I mean, it's not you got a coaching staff problem. If you get 5 out of the top 6 years of the number 1 class, and you can't sit there and say our personnel ought to be better than everybody else's. With that being said, it's not a slam dunk that they're going to win this first ball game against Florida State.
No.
But I will say this: I think Georgia is the only team in the East that would have a chance to go up against them. And Alabama doesn't play them. They play Tennessee at home. They've beaten them 11 straight years, I believe it is, and they play at Vanderbilt, who in my mind is the weakest team in that division. And they play LSU at home. I really think if they get by Florida State, the only team with a realistic chance, if you just look at personnel, to beat them is Auburn.
Yes.
Auburn's got the second best personnel in the league, but Auburn's got a schedule that I can't imagine. Auburn's the only team in the country that plays both the teams that played for the national championship last year. And
That's
they play
correct.
Clemson. They play Clemson on the road before their new quarterback has really had a chance to get in the groove. Then they have a three-game stretch when they play at LSU, at Arkansas, at Texas A&M with no home game in between. Who in the world thought that was a good idea? And then they close out with Georgia and Alabama, and while they are at Jordan-Hare, the last 6 times, since Auburn played for the national championship in 2013, the last 6 times that they played Alabama and Georgia, they're 0-6. So as good as Auburn is on paper, and as good as I really feel their team is, playing Clemson and Alabama and 3 SEC West teams in a row on the road is not a great formula for success. I can't imagine anybody's going to have a much more challenging schedule than that.
Well, that's true. And anytime you're in the West, it's going to be tough regardless of how the schedule stacks up.
That's right.
You got to play the other 6 guys in there.
That's right.
Lynn, now, it's time for us to get down to some predictions for this weekend.
Okay.
And we're going to start over there in the East with the Florida Gators, big game. I say the second biggest one in the conference this weekend. Florida Gators and the Michigan Wolverines at Jerry World. Who do you like?
I like Michigan. Several reasons. Florida has had 7 suspensions of players. A couple of them would have been key. They've had a couple of injuries. that are going to have players probably not playing. I saw where they're probably going to play 3 quarterbacks in that game. Going up against a really good team with 3 quarterbacks is a formula for disaster.
We know that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Zaire, who came from Notre Dame, you could make a case, and he does have a strong arm, and he's been up against some great teams on the field. However, he could not earn the job as starting quarterback on a Notre Dame team that went 4-8. So if you couldn't win the starting job on a bad team, coming down now to go up against the Southeastern Conference doesn't sound to me like something that you ought to hang your hat on. Felipe Franks looked good in the spring, but again, it'll be his first year. You don't know how Del Rio will come back from injury. So all of those factors, I lean toward Michigan. It won't shock me if Florida wins, but since we're doing picks, I'll have to go with Michigan.
I'm in 100% agreement with you. I think the Wolverines are going to win. I'm pulling for the Gators in the SEC, but I just don't think so. Now we're going to pass by Georgia and Appalachian State and go right on into the Kentucky Wildcats in southern Mississippi at Hattiesburg. They beat them in Lexington last year. Golden Eagles did. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to take Kentucky, but it's a shaky pick.
Right.
Southern Miss, exactly right. Southern Miss went up there and beat them last year. Kentucky now has got a more solid quarterback situation, and Southern Miss does not have their quarterback. They had one of the best quarterbacks in the country last year as far as a dual threat quarterback. He's gone now, but I'll tell you, got to look for maybe the best running back you've never heard of, Ito Smith. Smith. If Ito Smith were playing for a Power 5 team, he'd be being mentioned probably as a Heisman Trophy candidate. Ito Smith is outstanding. It's going on the road. This is one of 2 or 3 ball games that could be impacted by the weather. This situation that's happening over in Texas now, I saw it's moving toward Louisiana. By the time we're on the air, this show's pre-recorded. By the time that we're on the air, you may have a terrible weather situation in southern Mississippi and all along the coast there. And if that's the case, then that certainly can make an impact in slowing things down and how things go. I'll take Kentucky, but it's a shaky pick. This is a real trap game. Southern Miss could win this ball game.
I have a hard time on this one because one of the reasons being last year, Southern Miss has generally got a pretty tough football team, and they're playing at home. But I do like the Wildcats as the dark horse in the SEC East, and I'm going to go with them in a very close game.
I agree with you.
And now let's get down to South Carolina. You mentioned South Carolina and NC State and Charlotte. How about that one?
I like South Carolina. I think they got a better team. Again, it's a dangerous game. North Carolina State is they're not up there with the lead 3 or 4 guys in the conference. So that's one not being mentioned. They got a tough schedule. But they're a dangerous team. I like Jake Bentley. I think that he's an unsung quarterback. On the South Carolina side, Sky Moore is back. And anybody really keeps up with this, Sky Moore, S-K-A-I, Sky Moore, he was an All-American potential player, had a great season 2 years ago and got hurt in the first ball game last year. So they get their, in my opinion, their best defensive player is back. So I like what South Carolina is doing. I like the Gamecocks to win that game.
Well, we're in agreement again. I think they're going to be an improved team. I like Bentley, too. I'm a little impressed. I didn't think they'd get 6-6 last year on the Muscat, but they did. And I think they'll do maybe the same record, maybe an improved football team, but not necessarily a better record.
And that's possible. That's certainly possible.
And let's wrap up the East with Tennessee and Georgia Tech in Hotlanta Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Monday, Labor Day.
All right, I'm going to take Tennessee, but again, it's one of those. It's very shaky. You got teams with problems here. Georgia Tech lost its quarterback. Their top running back, Dedrick Mills, who got suspended for 3 games last year and still scored 12 touchdowns and was one of the leading returning rushers in the Atlantic Coast Conference. He was thrown off the team last week for, again, breaking team rules. Losing your best rusher 2 weeks before your first ball game against an SEC team is not a great thing to happen. No. On the other hand, Tennessee lost Josh Dobbs. Their offense was not the greatest thing in the world last year. It was disappointing after how everybody thought it was going to be. And they've lost a couple of players to injuries. They lost one of their senior wide receivers. They've lost him for the year with a collarbone injury. They've got another defensive back. It's my understanding would not play. The game is in Atlanta, which is a little bit of a home field advantage for Tech, but I don't think it's at Grant Field, and a lot of Tennessee fans can come down for that ball game. I'm going to take Tennessee. I think an SEC team of that level is probably going to have a better overall personnel, but they've got some similar problems. And Georgia Tech, the offense they run is a difficult offense to prepare for the opposing defense.
Yeah, that triple option's tough. And
It's tough. But once again, I think, and all of these are sounding like close games because I do think that almost every game is a toss-up. But I'll take Tennessee in the close game.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that also. And I read, I think in the paper, I saw it online this morning that Tech was sold 35,000 tickets. It actually sold more than Tennessee. And so I would imagine by game time it's probably going to be pretty even on the crowd. But, Georgia Tech's got a decent football team. But, again, I'll go with the SEC. We're going to disagree here in a minute at some point. Let's move on to the West.
Well, no, let's throw one more out there for the East, and let's see if we disagree on it. Vanderbilt plays at Middle Tennessee.
Now, to me, that's seriously a toss-up. And
what are you saying? I'll give you mine.
I'm going, I like a little bit of Derek Mason. I think he's got him improved. I love Kyle Stewart at quarterback. I remember what he did against us last year, and I'll even though they're playing in Murfreesboro, I mean, that's essentially Nashville, but I'm going to stick with the SEC.
Well, I'm going to go the other way and take Middle Tennessee. This is Rick Stockstill's outstanding coach, and Brent Stockstill, his son, outstanding quarterback, is coming back, bringing back great stats and a talented team. They're one of the two best teams in Conference USA, maybe one of the three best with Louisiana Tech and Western Kentucky. Now, Ralph Webb is a guy that people overlook, much like I said, Ito Smith of Kentucky. Ralph Webb is going to graduate, unless he gets hurt, he's going to graduate as the top leading rusher in Vanderbilt history.
He can do it.
It's a shame that he's not playing on a team that gets more visibility, but I'm concerned for Vanderbilt. I'm going to pull for Vandy. Obviously, I'm an SEC guy, but I lean toward thinking that Middle Tennessee might win this. It's in Murfreesboro. So basically, it's Vanderbilt people can drive from their campus over to the stadium in 30 minutes. It's while it is a home game, it's not a gigantic advantage there. But I'm leaning toward Middle Tennessee.
Okay, there we go. Now let's move into the West with LSU BYU, which is going to be moved, I suppose, it's scheduled for Houston. And I don't know where they're going to play the ball game, but they are going to play it. And
So it is going to be moved from Houston?
Yeah, that seems to be pretty certain. I saw where Joe Leba said he was pretty certain it was going to happen, but they're just not sure where yet.
Yeah, and I'm sure by the time that we're pre-recording this show, so I know by the time that we most people are hearing the show, the decision will probably have been made.
Right.
They would have been playing the game indoors, but that's not the problem. The problem is getting the teams there, getting the fans there, and interfering with the recovery effort. So, and this has happened to LSU now. I think this is the third time that in recent years that they've had games either have to be postponed or canceled or moved to other locations. And that's the danger of playing on the coast during hurricane season. Brigham Young has the advantage of having already played a game. Now, they weren't that impressive. They only won over Portland State by 20-6, and Portland State gave them a good ball game.
I saw a little bit of that one, yeah.
So there is an advantage, and they've got a powerful offense. Something you'll never have a situation almost to say about LSU. Their weak point is their defense, and they're going up against what should be a powerful offense at Brigham Young, although they didn't look at that much against Portland State. LSU lost 3 defensive linemen. They lost 3 linebackers. They lost heavily in the front 7. Arden Key, who's their best player, might be the best returning defensive player since Myles Garrett graduated from Texas A&M. Arden Key's not going to play for injury, and the quarterback situation, Etling is going to play at LSU. He won the starting job, but again, he hasn't been a lights out guy. We had Leonard Fournette as the number 1 running back in the country last year. We got Darius Geis in that position this year. Lindy's first team preseason All-American running backs, one of them is Darius Geis. Our second team running back, one of them is Cam Petway from Auburn. So we've got 2 of the top 4 running backs in the country being SEC players. But again, Darius, but Darius Geis has got to have some relief. I mean, you can't just give the ball to the same guy the entire time. Now, Brigham Young's defense, in fairness, they're one of those Mountain West defenses. They're not in the Mountain West, but they're in that region. and so they're not going to stop anybody either. So, I lean toward LSU because it's LSU. They got.
And it may be in New Orleans. They may be in New Orleans.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be any better. I mean, the Storm. By the time this show's aired, there may be warnings in Louisiana if that thing moves across. So, we'll see what they do with it. Or it could be if they can come up with a suitable date, they could postpone it and play it later in the year. Which I think would be an advantage to LSU if that were to happen. I'll take LSU. I can't pull against a LSU power and think that they're going to lose to a team from out west like that. However, there are some disadvantages going on this for LSU.
Well, there are, but they're a solid favorite, and I think they'll win by a couple of touchdowns. But I do think the SEC will hold up in that one. Now, we're running out of time, so let's hit some high spots on these next 2 or 3 games, and then we'll finish with Alabama and Florida State.
Okay.
Texas A&M, UCLA on Sunday in Pasadena. What do you think?
I lean toward UCLA. Josh Rosen's back. He's been kind of running his mouth off, but Josh Rosen's back, and that was a key thing last year for UCLA that he was gone. Texas A&M, quarterback uncertainty, either Hubenick, the senior, and you can say when you want him to come back, he's a senior. However, Texas A&M lost like 4 of the last 5 ball games, which is a trend that has been coming up now. They've been doing real good in the start of the season, and they're not doing well. They've got to travel. They probably have been limited in their practice because of the weather, and they're playing on the road against a veteran quarterback. Once again, I think A&M very well could win the game, but if I had to bet on the game, I'd take UCLA.
Yeah, UCLA is favored, and I like Texas A&M a lot this year overall, and I'm going to go with the Aggies on that one.
Okay.
All right, let's go a potential upset now. Ole Miss, I see, is a 24-point favorite over South Alabama, but we know good and well South Alabama has beaten an SEC team before. Who do you like in that one?
Well, I mean, I like Ole Miss to win the game. They got better players, but you've got this time last year, I think Mississippi State probably figured they were going to beat South Alabama. About 4 years ago, when Southern Miss rolled into Knoxville, I don't think that Tennessee was expecting to be behind in the fourth quarter at Neyland to South Alabama. Last year, San Diego State, undefeated, making a bid to move to the top 10, goes to South Alabama. Let's get this nuisance game out of the way so we can be looking to play Boise State. And South Alabama knocks them off, and they never come back. Joey Jones has done a great job with this program. I don't think that it'll catch Ole Miss off guard. The real question is going to be, what is everything off field doing to the psyche of Ole Miss? It could go one of 2 ways. It could really hurt them, or it could be a win-win for the Gipper. It's us against the world. And we'll see how that comes out. I like Ole Miss to win the ball game. Shea Patterson will be the best player on the field. But we've seen that South Alabama can pull upsets, but I like Ole Miss.
I do, too. I like Ole Miss. I'm thinking it might be close for a half, but I see them winning later on, and comfortably, probably. Okay, we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty as we move into our home state and our Auburn Tigers. Let's talk quickly about Auburn and Georgia Southern. And one thing I'd like to mention before we get into talking about that, 4 of Georgia Southern's last 7 games versus Power 5 schools were decided by 6 points or less. You better be careful, Auburn. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. People in our audience probably remember 3 years ago, Florida made the mistake of having Georgia Southern as their homecoming game, and Georgia Southern went down to Gainesville and won. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe Mark Riggs last year. Georgia had to hang in there to get the game into overtime to beat Georgia Southern in Athens. Georgia Southern a number of years ago had Auburn like 17-0 for Auburn scored, and Auburn went on and beat them like 30-something to 17. But Georgia Southern has got a pretty good record of winning or going very well against Southeastern Conference teams. This Auburn team is much more talented than Georgia Southern, and I think the coaching staff is going to be smart enough that they have pointed these things out that we've said about the danger that Georgia Southern could have. The danger would be that Auburn could look ahead to Clemson and say, okay, let's get this Georgia Southern thing out of the way. Then we're on the national stage. We're prime time up against the national champions. We knock off Clemson, and all of a sudden we're right in the middle of the national championship discussion. If they lose to Georgia Southern, not so much. So I do like Auburn. I think Auburn will win the game. They're a better team, but the better team doesn't always win.
I do, too. I like Kevin Steele coming back, and I think we're going to play good defense, and I also think Auburn's going to score a lot of points, and I think they'll win going away.
Auburn should score points against everybody they play.
They should. Well, folks, we're going to get right down to it. The biggest game in the country this weekend on Saturday, again, at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. You have the number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide, and I think certainly a top 5 team in the Florida State Seminoles. All right, give me your take, Lynn.
Yeah, I think Florida State's number 3 in one poll, number 4 in one. I like Alabama.
Yeah.
And that's no disrespect toward Florida State. Florida State's a very good team. But Alabama has got the balance all the way across the board. They've got the quarterback, they've got multiple running backs, they got Foster and Ridley at a wide receiver, and the new guy Jerry Jeudy, the freshman. So they got 3 very talented wide receivers. They've got two or three all-star candidate offensive linemen. They have one of the best defensive lines in the country. Maybe right in there, maybe with Georgia's and Clemson's. The linebacking core is always good. It's not a classic Alabama linebacking core, but they're always good. Got 2 or 3 really outstanding defensive backs led by Minka Fitzpatrick, and they got probably the best punter in the country. So that's a very, very sound Alabama team all across the board. Now, Florida State's sort of the same way. I mean, Francois is an experienced multi-threat quarterback like Jalen Hurts. Florida State's got good players across the board, and it would not be a shock if Florida State beats anybody in the country. But for this first ball game, I got to go with Alabama.
Well, that was a solid pick, and I have been saying that most of the year. Alabama's going to be favored, and Alabama's going to win. But as I get closer to the game, somehow I get an uneasy feeling that Florida State is going to come in there and upset Alabama, and I'm going to go with them to upset the University of Alabama in a barn burner and take over the number 1 position in the country.
That certainly could happen. And
also, in a sneak peek way ahead, I have Alabama losing bookends. I have them losing the game against Florida State and at Auburn late in the season. We can only.
Well, I think you will talk about that closer to the time, but on that one, if Auburn's got a much more challenging schedule than Alabama, and there's more opportunities for Auburn to lose than there is for Alabama. If that ball game were to come down, let's say each one of those teams are, just 0 losses or 1 or 2 losses, and you're playing for the Western Division and the chance to go to the championship. If that was the case, I'd probably take Auburn, looking this far ahead. However, if Alabama is in a position where Auburn can win that ball game and Alabama still go to the championship, and I think Alabama's schedule lends itself much more to them having a chance to be there than Auburn's, then I would take Alabama to win that game. So I think a lot of what happens during the season is going to impact what my view of that game will be in November.
Yep. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a fun and interesting time on the maiden voyage of the SEC yesterday and today. And Lynn, before we close out, I'm going to ask you where people can reach you, like an email or Twitter or whatever it may be at your magazine.
Well, our website is www.lindysports.com, LINDYSSPORTS, lindysports.com. Invite everyone to come in there during the season. I'm a columnist, and we'll be having columns every week, as do a lot of the people that work with our staff. We have predictions. We work with Sports Exchange and have sometimes as many as 100 new stories a day on our website. So encourage people to come in. Our college basketball magazines and our NBA magazines will be on stands by the end of September. You might find some places where our college football magazines are still on the stands, but they won't be more than just another week or two because they're pulled off for the college magazines to go on. And if you can't find our magazines in newsstands where good magazines are sold, call Lindy's office in Birmingham, 205-871-1182. 205-871-1182, and our folks there will make sure that we get it to you.
Thank you very much, my friend. And again, I am your host, Byrd LaCroix. You can find me on Twitter at Autull, AUTULL. My personal domain website with my personal blogs and sports blogs can be found at byrdlacroix.com. And also, you can find me at campuspressbox.com. Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for listening to the first show of the SEC yesterday and today. And we will see you next time. Be sure to love your neighbor. Goodbye.